Welcome to The Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Friday, we explore stories that are shaping our continent. The DRC and Rwanda have signed a provisional peace deal to ease conflict in East DRC. At the same time, the DRC extended its cobalt export ban to manage oversupply and support prices. Can this peace deal help reduce conflict and support economic recovery in the DRC? Nigerian security forces have made progress in fighting insecurity, killing 6,260 terrorists, arresting over 14,000 criminals, and rescuing 5,300 kidnapped victims in 2 years. Despite these attacks, why have these security efforts not led to eliminating Nigeria's major security challenges? The Nigerian Electoral Commission (INEC) has received 110 requests from groups seeking to become political parties ahead of the 2027 election. How might the growing numbers of aspiring political parties impact Nigeria's 2027 elections? Joining us today for insight is Confident Mark Harry, a security analyst at SBM. Welcome, Confident.
Hello, Veronica. Hello, listener.
It's great to have you. So let's start with the DRC and Rwanda signing a provisional deal. For the past months, we have seen the situation between DRC and Rwanda, go into this conflict. But now we're seeing there's a peace deal signed. Do you think that this deal will help reduce conflict and support economic growth in DRC, or do you think it's just temporal and we'll still see more conflict as we go through?
Yeah, it promises to end the conflict, but from my standpoint, it's more of a freezing that would happen. And I say this because the deal would have been signed a couple of weeks ago. Because ever since the ever since um, the offensive by the M23 rebels in at the start of towards the end of last year, it continued till about March this year. Since between March and April, there were talks and a lot of agitation for foreign intervention, and the Americans were the most obvious choices of both parties. I'm talking Rwanda, which later publicly came out to tongue-in-cheek acknowledge that not only were they backing the M23 rebels, but they also had their own soldiers, up to about a couple thousand soldiers, more or less, more than what the UN identified in the UN report, that there are about 4,000 Rwandan soldiers in the M23, that they were really in Eastern DRC. And then the Democratic Republic of Congo itself, which is one of the country's largest repositories of rare earths and mineral resources. And so, one of the reasons why the deal was delayed to be signed was because of the fact that, yes, despite the US being the preferred choices of both parties, there were concerns around getting a workable deal. And the concerns largely stemmed from what to do with the M23 rebels. And for the DRC on its part, it didn't want any kind of deal that would give the rebels any sort of place of compensation in the DRC. So because they had always felt that this was an overextension of the Rwandan government into DRC politics, that's one of the reasons the deal was sold, because Kinshasa did not believe that it was getting what we wanted in terms of getting one over Rwanda. So for some reason, I think they had finally softened their position on it. So one of the holdbacks in terms of why the deal took so long was that in the provisions, the M23 rebels were going to be integrated into Congolese society. In exchange for, I think, disarmament that they're going to be gradually eased into Congolese society. And one should also note that the M23 rebels are mostly Tutsis. For people who pay attention to conflicts in the Middle East, the 1994 Rwanda genocide epitomized the height of the conflict between the Tutsis and Hutus. So Congo is mostly Hutu and Rwanda is mostly Tutsi, even though they have a sizable Hutu population. So ever since the Second Congolese War in the late 1990s, we've had many Hutus forming guerrilla movements in Congo. And according to Rwanda, sometimes with support of the Congolese government, the FDLR, which is the major Congolese, which is the major Congolese who various rebellion movement, has made incursions into Rwanda and attacking Rwanda military positions. And so the M23, according to the Rwandan government and people who are sympathizing to them, is now hoping fighting back. And so that provision in the deal sort of wrong of Asia has gone millions, so it has really hold out. So now that the deal has been signed, personally, I do think that the deal losses over many points in settling this conflict. And to be fair to the Americans, it's not like as if they actively want to settle the conflict. So I think they're being pragmatic, knowing that this conflict is intractable and it is not something you can solve within a few weeks, especially a few months. And so they're trying to take whatsoever they can get out of it. We have to understand that American foreign policy nowadays is mostly cutthroat. We are going back to naked, cold, hard-nosed realism, where America and Donald Trump feels like the world has run its for too long, and it is now time for them to um, trade influence or access. And so we also do the same. And so the US government is also doing the same thing in Ukraine, where for support that the Biden White House has provided Ukraine with for Russia, the Trump administration is immediately deal. The minerals deal where they will give some money and will also about 25 to 50% of Ukrainian raw rare earths. So the Ukrainians refused to advise the team in return for so this I cannot do that the Trump White House is causing across board and trying to get value for money and everything. So for this kind of thing, it will work as so long as them are there and they have a stake in making sure that it works. But I think on the long term, these simmering issues will continue to slip through the cracks. Because right now, what the deal does is to people through the cracks, and for economic reasons, try to get people to put their souls in their shit. But in the long term, I think this conflict is going to remain, and then we might have to come back to the drawing board as to the kind of ceasefire we would need when the conflict erupts again.
Thank you for that. But I mean, another additional thing is that we've seen is that they've also like extended on their cobalt exports. How do you think this will affect their economy in the long term and short term? Because we know that some of the issues around the crisis also has been around their mineral resources as well. Do you think that this is a good strategy for the DRC to say, we're going to continue the ban export of cobalt, or do you think that they should open the market now in order to, grow their economy back as well?
No, no. So the reason for the ban on cobalt exports is that globally the price of cobalt has been going down considerably since what is it called? Since last year. I think the price of cobalt now for is I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember what the um, I'm trying to remember what the measurement is. Well, at the last time I checked, it was about $10. Yes. So, and in that particular regard, we're looking at something around Congo being the world's largest exporter of cobalt, the world's largest producer, and they're not getting value for money. So as a result, they are trying to do this thing where what cartels do, when there's oversupply, they tend to restrict production, and then they tend to restrict production in order to create a demand and then increase prices. But then the question then becomes, how easily would they be able to do so? I have to let me state this. Part of the deal, part of the deal between Rwanda and Congo was that sorry, Rwanda would secure economic benefits, which includes access to Congolese minerals like coltan, which generates about which the M23 gets $800,000 from monthly, making it one of the richest armed groups, militia groups in the region. So as I said previously, the deal gives them it's a political deal that gives M23, should I say, acceptance, formalization of influence in the Congo, but without military action. You understand? So for this particular one, I think one of the things that the Congolese government can do away from this is getting, I think to an extent, getting the cobalt facilities or the cobalt industry away from M23 hands. And so what this piece gives to them is that it helps them. So I think that breathing space is why they've been able to say one of the things we are going to do is to limit what is it called? Um is to limit cobalt exports to the international market. And so I think on the one hand, they are likely to succeed with it because if you look at the demand for electric vehicles and green renewable energy in terms of transportation, it is going up. To the best of my knowledge, I don't that there is a cartel for cobalt exports, just like the way we have in OPEC for oil. And if there is, I would expect that Congo will have the biggest share in it. And so for now, what they've been able to do is they have been able to do for 3 months. The effect on the market for that 3 months is something I cannot ascertain at the moment. But one thing I could give them credit for in my analysis is this. If they were able to get away with it for 3 months by not worrying, by reducing export to something, and it worked for them or they saw shifts in the markets, I think this extension of the export ban might actually do the trick. But then it becomes a balancing act if people now decide that, or at least electric vehicle markets and manufacturers decide that they have better prospects in other markets elsewhere than trying to get from Congo that's continuing to withhold production and has also been a place that is unstable. Given that now that the Americans are trying to get in on the action, we also see to see like there's a lot of competition between them and the Chinese, given that the Chinese control a very large market share in Congolese cobalt mining industry.
I mean, lastly, on this DRC Rwanda issue, you had mentioned like some of the terms of the deal. I just wanted to ask, who do you think that it favors? Do you think that this peace deal favors the DRC or Rwanda?
On surface level, it favors both. You understand? At first level, it favors both. So, as I said previously, on one hand, the US secures mining rights in Eastern DRC. So, Eastern DRC has reserves of cobalt, coltan, lithium, and so many other things that the DRC will now have to take such privileges that they've given to China and then give to the US. So that's on the American part. For Rwanda, like I said, they would secure economic benefits, including continued access to Congolese minerals like coltan, which, as I said previously, M23 were making 800K monthly, $800K dollars monthly from developing and exporting it. So that's one of the gains that Rwanda will gain, apart from trying to get the DRC apart from trying to get the M23 minerals into globalized influence structures in this and DRC. So, but for the DRC in itself, it gets security guarantees. You understand? So, it gets security guarantees to halt into three advances. Following the, as I said previously, so a couple of captures that they did in Eastern DRC, they captured Goma, Bukavu, and South Kivu. Goma is not Kivu, Bukavu is South Kivu, they're both in Eastern DRC. So to get the security guarantees, they're using mineral deals to support the economy and as well as political stability. So in the theory way you look at it, it looks like a win-win situation for all sides. So as answer your question, or who gets what or which side really is most more happy, I think for the three sides, as long as the deal holds, I think they're better off for it. It works until it no longer works.
Hmm. Interested. Let's move over to the Nigerian story where we have seen the security forces making progress in their fight against insecurity. We've seen the killing of 6,260 terrorists, the arrest of 14,000 criminals, the rescuing of 5,300 kidnappers. I mean, we're seeing this in 2 years, but I mean, if you look at the situation on ground, it looks different as if the security forces are not even working. Why do you think, like, despite these record efforts by um, the security force, we still haven't eliminated like major Nigerian security challenges? I mean, we are seeing the incidents in Imo State, incidents in Plateau State, and other states in the northern side of Nigeria, even other parts, the southeast and everything. So, what do you think is causing this?
There are lots of reasons why these things are being caused. Number one is that for various reasons and for reasons many of us have always talked about, security issues in Nigeria are drawn from a couple of sources that are yet to be addressed. So in the first part, we have the economic issues. Look, there is no Hail Mary that is coming to solve our security problem, because if you take 10 young men who went into crime and ask them, why did you go into crime? They will say, you hear a couple of them say things like, I could not fend for myself, I had to steal, I had to kill for me to eat, the economy. You hear things like, I used to be a cattle herder, and then some people came into my community and then they stole my cattle and they rendered me homeless. So I had to carry a gun for me to survive and protect myself. So they took his economic livelihood away. So the economy is part of it. And apart from that, if you add to his thinking, you would see that there is actually no justice. The justice system is broken, and people cannot seek redress under normal circumstances or through established courts and the normal procedures for that. And as such, they discovered that they better off getting justice for themselves. And you also hear a couple of things like, I was drawn into it for one or two reasons and all of that. All of these things, a lot of these reasons point to a broken system where number one, the economy does not survive and does not support survival of young people through the provision of jobs. It's we do not have the kind of jobs. The economy is not growing as a factor. It's not getting enough jobs to take care of our young population. And number two, we have overflowed security issues with kinetics more than non-kinetic issues. So you mentioned in the southeast, you mentioned the southeast in your intro. I have always maintained that security, the number one security threat issue in the southeast was not supposed to be a military issue, it was supposed to be a political issue. So if diplomacy and political situation had prevailed, we would not have seen the South is boiling to the kind of crisis it currently is. Because the challenge now is that to the Nigerian political elites, especially the ruling elites, every problem looks like a nail. And as such, they always have a mass to deal with it. And as such, the security challenges are mounting for these reasons, in addition to the fact that over time the over concentration of the military, the security architecture has been tilted towards regime change. This architecture as presently designed is working perfectly in the sense that it is only designed to protect whoever the man in our is. And that overwhelming focus has not been able to metastasize into better governance because that's the relegation of national security as an afterthought. So whenever they come out to make these proclamations, we have done this, we have killed this number of people, we have killed this number of, you have to take into account that all of these things are just things that look flashy on the surface. As long as it does not translate into better security, as long as issues such as political issues such as boundary delimitations will stop, proliferation of community clashes along land, along issues like land, fish pond, natural resources. We've not dealt with issues such as open grazing, we've not enforced open grazing laws, we've not secured the border very well, no matter how many operations we carry out in Nigeria's border areas. As long as the border is not secure, people can always pour in, arms can always pour in. So it feels like whatsoever victory the military forces are claiming in recent times, it is more of pouring water into a basket because they are playing basketball where they are hitting one, where they dies, and then in the next place the same thing comes down. And I'm telling you this because it is not theoretical. In 2021, the military decided to launch a full-scale offensive against bandits in the northwest. They shut down telecommunications in Sokoto, Katsina, Zamfara, and the likes. They did that campaign for about a month or two. They even did curfew, stopping Okada from moving from certain areas in certain areas from 6 p.m. At the end of the day, what happened? They had their tails into their legs and they came back and then they had to use all of those restrictions. Whereas they moved man and personnel as well as resources to the northwest, the bandits they said they were chasing after, they came down to the north central to chill. In the same time, insecurity in Kogi and Kwara skyrocketed till today. We are still having those remnants. While they were fighting in the northwest, the bandits fled to Niger Republic. Many of them moved down to Bauchi. Till today, as I speak to you, insecurity in those places are over the roof. So no matter how much they try, no matter how much, as long as these fundamentals are not addressed, we will keep working the more.
On to our final story, we have INEC has stated they have received quite a number of applications for um, political parties registration ahead of the 2027 election. What do you think is driving the rise of applications to political parties? And do you think it says a lot about our engagement in politics in Nigeria? And do you also think that the rise of more political parties will affect the outcome of the 2027 upcoming general elections in Nigeria?
Okay, so one of the reasons why we're having proliferation of political parties is the system allows for it. And so when I say the system allows for it is we're a multi-party democracy. More often than not, democracies usually coalesce into major parties. If it is not a one-party state, or and if it is not a two-party state like we had under Abacha, it usually coalesce into big parties. So maybe two, three, or four at the maximum. And so, if you register a party today, there are some certain benefits you get. There's the most immediate benefits you get by getting funding from INEC. There's a certain amount that is allocated to you, and apart from that, there's the concerted benefits you might get if you decide to do a merger with the larger political parties, you support them and everything. There are some deals that you could get that could be quick code for you. And you might not necessarily get positions if the party wins, but you might get compensated for doing some of their dirty work. So many people understand this game, so they rush to register parties, not necessarily with the hope of winning elections, because to win elections in Nigeria, it costs a lot of money to do so, and many of the smaller parties or the people registering them do not have the war chest for that, and so they try to do this thing by gaming the system. And apart from that, we see that many people who register parties do not register with the kind of ideologies that sort of bind individuals together to make a change. So, look, for instance, say in the UK, where we have the Reform Party, Reform UK. It's it's the most right-wing party of note in the UK, and its MPs and members are generally against immigration in kind that you will not get to see in the mainstream Conservative Party. So many other things that the so this is essentially a party of like minds. This is exactly how political parties form. We don't like this thing. This is our ideology. This is how it should be. We're against abortion. We're against same-sex marriage, or we are socialists. We believe that the state should be bigger than it actually is, and everything. So we share this ideology. We'll come together and form a party. In Nigeria, it's largely not so. It's more of political parties are more of vehicles, strange bedfellows coming together to for the purpose of taking power for themselves. So since ideologies do not bind individuals to forming a common good in terms of starting a political party, it's the bar is really low on what constitutes a political party. So yeah, that's why you have a proliferation of them. We have so many. Sometimes INEC does this thing where they do house cleaning, where they register and list many of them, but it really hasn't stopped people from stopping from doing what they're doing basically.
It's interesting. I mean, because I mean, there has been like a wave of people saying, there's a defection from um, other parties um, to one party, and we're just seeing like a lot of party changing back and forth, and a lot of people are supporting, let's register new parties. It's going to have an impact, but mainly, do you think that not only having political parties, are we also going to see a rise in participation in the voting and in politics as well? Because it's one thing to register a party, like you said, some are registering for some purposes to be able to get benefits from the larger party, like emerging and other stuff. But do you see it changing voter apathy as well, where people see a new party coming on and buy into their ideology and the movement and what they stand for, um, and then following those parties and increase turnout of voters?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So I told you, like I said previously, many of these things are opportunistic. So I'll give you a story. In 2019 general elections, there was this party that came third in terms of the number of votes concerning the presidential election. The name of the party was the PRP. So as this thinking goes, some guy from Edo State who had been in the US for some time came back and registered his party and mischievously decided to adopt the parties of the PDP, the main opposition party as of then, also decided to adopt a name or an acronym that is similar to the PDP. So, yeah, I think the name is Party People Democratic Party, whereas PDP is known as the People's Democratic Party. And given Nigeria's high illiteracy rates, given that we don't use ranked choices in Nigeria, we just complete on a very long ballot. So many people are illiterate and they can hardly tell the difference between PDP and PRP. The stylistics of the letters are the same. So it's very possible that some people had gone to vote for the PDP and then they mistakenly, since it's done alphabetically, they had gone to thumbprint for the PRP. And some guy who nobody has ever heard of comes third in the presidential elections, garnering 110,000 votes, even more than more well-known people like, say, Omoyele Sowore or some other people. And so these are the kind of stunts that people really pull. It's not like as though they really are wanting to. They're in the game for the kind of development they're saying or to increase political participation and anything. If at all, the idea is to improve voter turnout. We have certain other issues to deal with voter turnout, such as the preparedness and trust in the electoral system, than pulling all these kind of things. Like I said previously, this proliferation of political parties is mostly about gaming the system and positioning yourself.
Thank you so much, Confidence, for joining us today on the episode. It was really great to have you.
Well, thank you.
And to all our listeners, And to all our listeners, this podcast is by SBM Intelligence. You can access our podcast by searching for SBM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. For deeper insights into our work, visit our website at sbmintel.com. Remember to connect with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. That's all for today. Thank you for listening.